Hello and welcome to the Sales Leaders series. I'm your host, Freddie, where I'll be gathering B2B SaaS sales leaders from across the world to answer 5 short, topical B2B SaaS sales questions. These questions are going to be the same each week, bar one, giving you insight and different perspectives into how top performers within the industry think, as well as actionable advice you guys can use in your own selling careers. Today, I'm joined by Hannah Ajikawo. Hannah has over 15 years of experience in software, go-to-market execution, and revenue leadership, having held multiple sales leader, go-to-market advisory, and CRO roles herself across different companies and consultancy firms, including Acxiom and Skaled Consulting. Hannah is one of the leading voices on go-to-market strategy, execution, and revenue leadership, both in EMEA and the US. Today, Hannah is the CEO and founder of Revenue Funnel, a middle of the funnel consulting firm helping tech and service businesses convert more at higher values. Alongside this, you can spot Hannah speaking and coaching at SaaS events around the world on her webinar series, Advise World, and on her LinkedIn if you haven't already. Hannah, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Freddie, for inviting me on. Brave decision, because I speak a lot and I'm extremely passionate about what I do. So let's see how we go.
I've been excited for this conversation, Hannah. I mean, for all those listening, me and Hannah met, gosh, it must have been at a sales event quite a while ago now. So I've kind of been excited to kind of jump into some of your experience and your opinions on kind of where the sales and SaaS world is going. I think a appropriate place to start would be, it's been increasingly more difficult to access and engage the entire buying committee on deals, particularly enterprise. It leads to kind of AEs and teams relying on at least one or two people to sell through into those different individuals within those buying committees. And often those decisions internally, I guess on the buyer's side, are being made without that AE being able to influence those decisions. What are you seeing AEs do more to kind of access more of those key influencers in their deal?
So, controversial opinion. I do not believe that AEs are doing a ton of things differently to kind of access different decision makers across the decision making unit. But I wanted to kind of recast the question and restructure it. So if you, so Freddie, even putting it to you, right? So imagine you have, you got a group of friends, and you discover, I don't know, you bump into someone super famous. I don't know, who's someone that you like who's super famous?
John Mayer, the guitarist.
There we go. So John Mayer, the guitarist, right? Now, you are going to be super excited to go tell all of your friends that, oh my gosh, I met John Mayer and he's like, we're cool. Like we're on WhatsApp basis. Like he's my friend, right? So I mentioned that because sales reps are they're not giving buyers a reason to get excited to introduce them to decision-making unit. Like when someone impresses you and you feel like they're going to make you look good and increase your status inside your organization in the circles that you're operating in, then it wouldn't even feel like a hassle to say, you go do this, like you go speak, right? So to go back to your question, what am I seeing reps do better? What I'd like to see reps do better is one, give people a reason to introduce them to the decision-making unit. And two, be someone who is deemed credible enough and kind of risk-free enough to introduce to their decision-making unit. Because that is, every time I introduce you to somebody that I know who is depending on me to champion a decision that's going to create change inside my organization, I need to be certain that you're going to make me look good and you're not going to like decrease my status, because that is the most embarrassing thing ever. I always say, think about how embarrassed you feel when you even recommend a film, a movie, a night out to your friends, right? And it doesn't go to plan. They're like, oh yeah, we're not doing anything Freddie suggests. We ain't doing that again. And that's just your friend, and it's a low risk, I don't know, 10 to 50 quid investment. So I try to work with reps to shift their mindset a bit. Like what would make them want to introduce you? Like what value are you going to add? So it's really about thinking, what am I doing to firstly understand a bit more about the structure of that decision-making unit? Is there even one? Everyone's like, introduce me to people. And I don't really know who going to be involved yet? And then two, am I credible enough to even put myself forward to get closer to them?
And I'm curious, especially if you are an AE working on that deal and you don't necessarily have
Mm.
a big title behind you to kind of at least get that upfront trust, right? And with so much noise for if there is a decision-making committee or at least structure, with different people coming into that conversation, trying to sell you stuff. I mean, how do you stand out from the crowd? How do you build that trust?
Yeah, no, and this is a thing that comes up, right? Particularly with, if you think about junior reps who are trying to kick down the first door to even start that conversation. I always talk about borrowing credibility. So I may not be seen as the most credible source to kind of engage with the decision-making unit, but if I am connecting myself to others who are, then that helps to kind of increase my worthiness of engagement. So as an example, even something that I've done over there, and it wasn't intentional to be fair, it just kind of happened. I was like, what would make people listen to me more? And it was tying a lot of my thought processes and strategies and tactics to research that Gartner was doing. Because I was like, well, everybody listens to Gartner. Gartner says something, they're like, this is actually this is a good resource for me. So creating that connection, what then happened actually, ironically, was a lot of people from Ghana, the leaders started connecting with me on like LinkedIn and stuff like, who is this person that talks about our research better than we do? So if you borrow credibility and align yourself with people that are already viewed as credible, then you get yourself one step in the door, right? So here's a quick example. Freddie, you are trying to reach out to somebody and you're like, this CEO is never going to listen to me. I go and find out who the CEO listens to. That's it, right? And I start to create content, or I post even just like 5 posts on LinkedIn talking about a topic that is going to be that I believe is going to resonate, and highlighting people that I believe the CEO would definitely know in their field, in their industry. And just by doing that, when the colleague does forward over the details to say, speak to Freddie, it's like, oh, okay, just done a quick Google. Freddie talks about this all day, every day. He talks about buyer collaboration all day, every day. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. You just borrowed credibility without being that credible yourself, right? Yet, who knows?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm assuming, like, do you think that that's most of the onus? I mean, I, I kind of agree with this anyway, but most of the onus is on the individual salesperson. But for all of those kind of sales leaders leading teams,
Hmm.
say, listening to this, is there anything that they can do to enable some of those AEs to do that better?
So no, I don't think it's all on the AE. I feel like we put way too much on salespeople's shoulders already. They're expected I always call it the sales to market strategy. Just they're expected to figure everything out and work out how you best solve customers' problems. I think it's a business thing. So I really feel like as an organization, it doesn't matter how small you are, you should be seen as a kind of you should aim and aspire to be an organization that people look to for answers and looks to for suggestions for things. So it starts from the top. So it really starts from the leader, the CEO, the C-suite. Below that, the sales leaders should be helping reps to build their confidence and give them enough and extend them enough trust to go out and share some of their opinions, their thoughts, their feelings. Now, depending on the topic, what I want to do as a sales leader is increase my team's domain expertise. I really want them to be seen and build their expertise around whatever we're solving for. So I just obsess over customers. I'm like, forget all the other fancy stuff, forget the product. It's obsess over your customer, because if you are doing that, then you're just going to be so closely aligned to them that it becomes quite easy to engage with them. So to get really granular on the question, then is like, what more can sales leaders do is in those one-to-ones, in those regular weekly training, obsess over the customer. So find very specific things that are going to be top of mind for if you're selling to marketers, you're selling to revenue leaders right now, and get the reps comfortable with talking about them. I just feel like we mention something and reps don't physically say the words. Like I get reps to stand in front of the mirror and repeat things 10 times. I'm like, before you start your day, go say this 10 times until you're like, oh my God, this is boring, because we don't talk enough. There's no water cooler. We don't talk enough. So we start our days, if you don't have kids or a partner, silent until like 11 a.m. I haven't actually spoken today. So we need to talk and get used to saying things, particularly around things that matter to our prospects.
Switching focus to the buyer side.
Yeah.
And I think with so much information whether that's on, on G2 or LinkedIn, and I think this is kind of in general anyway, that buyers are just much more sophisticated at evaluating different vendors than I guess they used to be, right? Incredibly formulaic, especially when you move up those tiers into enterprise in the way in which they purchase and procure software. What is some of the best strategies you've seen for selling into enterprise over the last 18 months? And then possibly how is that changing?
So that's a big question, and it
Yeah, it's
varies.
a big question.
So if I think about defining enterprise, are you talking about enterprise organizations or enterprise deal sizes, which may be like six figures up?
I think enterprise deal sizes is more
Okay,
appropriate. Yeah.
yeah, because that differs a lot. So I've worked with about 35 different go-to-market teams over the last 3 to 4 years. And what things that I've seen that have started to work well is a couple of things. So you'll see the concept of like an ecosystem surfacing quite a lot. So we're talking about the ecosystem sell and how you collaborate with partners and stuff. So I'm seeing companies lean into their partner infrastructure more. So they're actually investing more in partners to say, how do we do this together and go into to kind of solve a bigger problem together? Because firstly, if you think about an organization, a large organization, I can't remember the most recent research, but a large enterprise will have about 300 applications inside their business. And when it comes to go to market, they may have about 30 or 40 tools alone. So that's 30 or 40 customer success managers, 30 or 40 sales. They're like, I'm over it. I'm over it. And that's why they try to do that without us. So as a rep and as an organization, we need to try to shrink that, right? So they talk about tech consolidation. I think like sales process consolidation, because I want to do this once, and I'm hoping you can solve a lot of things. So the ecosystem slash nearbound slash partnership thing is being quite big. Now, the other thing that you're seeing a lot of people do is knowing that an organization, their buying journey starts before your sales process. I put a post up talking about enterprise sales processes, saying that when do they actually start? So I feel like we categorize them completely wrong anyway, and that's why we have deals in our system for like 372 days open. It's like when did the sales process like when did that engagement start? I mentioned that because companies know that they're doing a lot of content creation because they're like this organization needs to learn. So if it's not communities, then it's a ton of virtual events. And then it's like really intimate seminars where you can get people in a room with their peers to talk about something, and you do not sell to them. Like the one thing you don't do is you don't sell to them. You feed them and you get them around their peers and you offer them beverages, but you don't sell to them. So what that does is it creates more spaces to learn. And then of course, the aim is over time, you're front of mind. So again, you mentioned this for a different question, but it's not a salesperson's responsibility to do that. It's a business decision to say we're going to provide resources to create more learning environments for our prospects who we know if they're going to spend 100K plus, that process is going to start before we have that one-to-one interaction with a sales rep.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I guess that's incredibly intentional. And I think you do see that on LinkedIn nowadays anyway. I mean, it's so much more focus on education and I guess front end nurture, which I think is important because like you say, people aren't ready to buy after that phone call, right? And sometimes I think they don't even know the problems they've got as well, right? So having that content to highlight that and educate that, I think is really important. Taking a bit of a shift to your personal background as a kind of sales lead yourself, and then moving up into all sorts of different consulting roles too. You've been in sales and obviously consulting for over 15 years now. And this is the question I ask kind of everyone that we get on the show. Feel free to go in as much depth as you would like on this. What has been your toughest moment in your career? If you had to choose one, how have you dealt with that moment? And for anyone that might be going through anything similar, what
Mhm.
advice would you give to those individuals?
I think that the hardest part of my career is getting to a point, I'd say probably about 7 years ago, where if I looked left and right at the peers that I started out with and also was training, right, I was like, I'm not where I should be. So I'm not where I should be kind of from like what I've accomplished and also like from a title perspective. I was just like, I should be way, way ahead of where I am now. But I didn't really know I didn't know why. So the biggest thing that I did is I became more intentional. 7 years ago, a lot of my decision making was based on the impact that it would have on my partner or family. So that's the first thing. The second part was going to be on the fact that I had a lot of financial insecurity. So I was literally taking the job that paid the money. I'm like, well, whoever's going to pay me, I'll get in there and figure it out. So the big thing here is that I had to make a big shift myself and say, okay, well, I can always say that I am recruiter's nightmare. Like, how the hell are you going to put me in a role? Only because there was so much like choppy this and choppy that. And some of it was down to, a lot of it is actually down to companies you get in because I didn't do the necessary due diligence to find out it's their infrastructure is fundamentally broken. And that's really what triggered my consulting. I'm like, how comes I've been really successful in, for what I see, like pretty basic environments where I'm just like, well, good tool. And I was like, okay, the tools, good products, good training, people need it, quite a broad market. There's enablement, it's consistent, and there's just a consistent play. So I started to look out for those signs, right? Even though I was still making decisions based on finances, I was like, okay, my next mission now is every time I go to an organization, I'm going to learn and I'm going to do more, go above and beyond my job. So I'm not just going to sell or like lead a team or train them. I'm going to look at strategy. I want to see what they're doing. And in some organizations, they granted me the space to do that. And in others, they're like, Hannah, just sell some stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I mentioned all of that because the shift that I had to make was firstly, like personally, kind of doing some introspection. Like what do I need to fix about myself where I give myself more of me than I am to others? That's the first thing. The next thing was remove debt from my life and increase my financial literacy. And then the last thing was look for leverage. I remember going to an interview with a sales leader at the time, and he's like, okay, so I can see lots of success here. I can see some like a lack of success here. He's like, why were you successful? And I was like, well, I don't know. I couldn't really pinpoint it. So I had to I had to start like writing down, like, what did you do? Like, why was that so successful? So then I became more intentional. And then I started to take on more consulting gigs, which for me was giving me more leverage. So more intention, really diving into learning and upskilling myself. So remember, I came from organizations that would train me all the time. So I never took any responsibility for training myself ever. I had like a couple of sales books, the one you read the Challenger, like half of it, and you're like, this is boring. And then you read Spin Selling, which was great. And that was it. I was like, that's it. And I think Sales for Dummies was my first ever sales book in 2008, right? But like, I mentioned all of that because I always say to people, you don't have to have a successful career by being in every president's clubs because some companies don't even have that. So when that's a criteria on a job description, they're like, my company never had that. So how do I show my success? You can just hit your target and live a really great life. But if you want to do that, particularly in this economy, you need to take ownership of your life. You need to do that self introspection and make sure that you start to work on and address some of your own things that hold you back. You also need to increase your financial literacy. Everybody has to do that. You don't get an option to do that. And then go where you're going to learn and earn. So I was looking for places to earn and I wasn't learning. Then I was like, okay, let me go where I can learn. And if I just pay my bills, I'm okay. And I found a happy medium in consulting doing both. So now, I can pick up the phone to so many revenue leaders who are just like, hey, Hannah, I just want to bounce some ideas off of you. Occasionally they pay me and I can pay my bills. But essentially that was really hard for me. But of course I turned my whole life around in a space of 5 or so years.
Thanks for sharing that, Hannah. I really appreciate that. For those, especially in sales, it seems like consulting, there's a lot of ties and that, between the two. Is there anything that you learn, especially in those first few years of the consulting side of things, that has kind of elevated the way in which, I mean, obviously you're still consulting, but if you were going to go back into sales, it's elevated the way in which you think about sales from a different perspective?
Absolutely. So the thing is, it won't, for me and my character, the only thing it allows me to do is probably be a bit more granular and even more curious. Outside of that, the reason why I transitioned over consulting and it felt relatively easy for me is because I've always been very buyer-centric. I've always been like, why do you care? Why is this important? Like, what's going on? Have you thought about this? And always being confident, challenging people, being like, I mean, that's all right, but have you seen this? Have you acknowledged this? So that's always been okay for me. Now, where everybody thinks I've been a senior salesperson and I've been a sales leader and now I can consult it's very different. And I know that because I've hired and had to manage out consultants myself over the last five or so years. So the reason why is because when you are a consultant, particularly around go to market, is you need to care And you need to look at everything downstream. So you're not just selling. You're not just selling and doing sales manager stuff. You're also doing customer support, customer success, and account management. So you're trying to identify points of additional value from some kind like the typical account manager. You're then trying to make sure that everything you promise is being delivered on as a customer success person. And then you're answering tickets. Hey, this isn't done quite right. Oh, this playbook you built, I'm not agreeing with this philosophy and framework. So, and most senior leaders who transition into consulting recognize that quite fast. And they're like, oh my God, this is so much work. And I'm like, exactly. Yeah, it's not easy at all.
Switching back to kind of sales teams, it's been a tough year for delivering sales quotas. I think for most businesses, especially in 2023. And as we head into 2024, a lot of the conversations that I've had with sales leaders and CEOs, especially on this podcast, are kind of approaching 2024 with cautious optimism. Unsure if the macroeconomic environment is obviously going to improve, yet confident it won't worsen in general. Are there any common themes you're hearing as to how enterprise teams in particular are setting themselves up for success next year?
Now, everyone's still asking the question, what the hell do we do?
Yeah, literally.
So what's interesting is we're going, there's a lot of going back to basics. So I think that the trend that we're going to see a little bit more of it is there's going to be two buckets, in my opinion. We're going to see companies who are like, you know what, we're going to really shift the way in which we're structuring our enterprise sales teams, right? So, and that's from like the SDR through to the kind of senior sales reps. And that's going to be like, okay, so our SDRs are not going to have the same type of structure and setup as before, when they just have to book 20 meetings a month. Like, we have to shift the focus. So I've seen companies who are like, it's not booking 20 new business meetings, it's booking 7 people to attend one of our events. It's booking, 7 people to have a new business meeting, and it's pushing towards our content, like our high converting content, like maybe a webinar or something that's, I don't know, an event, or it's just something that they have. And the reason why is because it's like, we know that some of these people aren't ready to have a new business discussion. They're just curious about something that we've raised their awareness of. And they're like happy to be in an environment where I can continue learning. So we're going to see people make some, what I call to be quite radical changes, because it impacts things like comp, number of reps you need in your team, and the entire way you reverse engineer your target. And then on the flip side, we're going to start to see, there's going to be 3 buckets. So that's one. The other one's going to be same old, just keep doing more of what you're doing. And then the other one's going to be people saying, let's try out how we can leverage generative AI a bit more, and really be intentional about how we're replacing some of the processes inside our teams. Will that mean more tech? For some, yes. For others, they'll just leverage things like GPT and just kind of take advantage of providing premium licenses to that, if you can get off the waiting list and into actively using it. And the reason why, because we're entering into like phase 2 of high experimentation. In one of my LinkedIn lives, I'm not sure if you caught it, but I was speaking to Olga Denisova, and she said, you have to create your own best practices. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, which means you have to go out and experiment. And it starts from alignment. You have to create alignment across your go-to-market org, full stop. And that's not just, hey, we sell to this company, but it's what's our message, what's our targets, how are we measuring that, and how we're ensuring that what KPIs are we using to illustrate that. And then it's actually creating the experimentation at the back end to say, okay, in Q1, this is what we're going to try. Because you can't just go in and be, everyone wants like the blueprint. What's the thing that I have to do? And I always focus on fundamentals, which frustrates people, because I'm not going to give you 100 tactics. I'm like, yeah, you can ask this question in every discovery call, but the fundamental shift you have to do is you have to shift your business to be buyer oriented. So you do need to provide solutions that allow you to collaborate with buyers. You do need to provide environments that allow buyers to learn. You do need to provide environments where you're not selling, you're just giving. And that is the thing that's going to provide the longest term value, because that's what I've seen over 15 years. We just give and educate and shift mindsets, rather than being like, what's the 10 questions I need to ask in every qualification call? Yeah, that's going to change again and again and again. So the fundamentals is buyer centricity, but not lip service, actually doing it in practice.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And something that I want to kind of follow on from on that, you mentioned obviously the AI lab. What what are you excited about for next year?
Mm.
Whether that's like tech, trends, predictions. I mean, what's getting you excited about next year?
Oh yeah, it has to be AI. Not that it's new. I always say my first AI startup was in 2011, so it's not new. It's just the generative AI that allows us to interface with it is new. So or evolving. So I say that because I really want companies to get excited at the prospect of having AI address parts of their buyer journey, right? If I could go online right now regarding some of the tools that I'm exploring and just have some basic questions asked and then AI interface with me, I don't even care if it's a call. Before I sign up, enter into your onboarding program and you're sending me 20 emails a day, that's fine. Like, I don't see a problem with that. And I said that the way in which we're going to allow that to happen and for it to be something that buyers not like, I don't want to talk to a robot, is by literally saying, I am a bot, or I am an AI assistant, or I'm leveraged by GPT or whatever. And I'm here to help you do these three things or this one thing. And I think people will be okay with that because we've been doing that in B2C for about 7 years. Yeah, I mean, how hard was it to talk to your bank? Right. Okay, that was frustrating because you're like, I just need to solve this thing. But oftentimes you go on and it's like, you do realize if you go on this, you can get that answer. It's like, oh, okay. So it's not new to us. I just feel like we have to get more comfortable as revenue leaders saying, I'm actually going to do this, like this 0.3% of our sales process. It's just going to be AI. I don't need no one to sort that out, or downstream with existing customers where we're talking about low touch customers, providing them with resources and tools that are driven through AI. So I'm excited about that and how it can improve over the next sort of 18 months.
Amazing. Hannah, those were all of the questions I had
Cool.
for you today. It's been short, but really, really sweet. For those that are listening, that want more information about Hannah, revenue funnel, any of the things that we kind of chatted about today, then there'll be a bunch of links, show notes down below, wherever you're watching or listening this podcast. Hannah, before we wrap up, is there any final parting words you'd like to leave the audience with, whether they are an AE or a CRO or a whatever?
For the revenue leaders, don't be afraid to have consulting partners. It's so funny when I work with revenue leaders who have used consultants, they go into their next role asking for consultants because they're like, it's just going to get me there faster, particularly in an environment particularly in the SaaS and tech environment. For an AE, pick who you're going to listen to next year. It's very noisy. There's a lot of influencers. There's a lot of thought leaders. And you get to a point where you're like, well, I'm starting to get conflicting ideas. So try to curate your feed and say, and even if it's in an Excel spreadsheet, who are the 5 people I just want to follow throughout this year? It might be a leader. It might be someone outside of your field. It could be someone outside of your role, like marketing, but just find them and just learn from them, because the consistency of listening to someone who is achieving results and supporting you is going to be better than listening to 100 people where there's just so many ideas that you can't execute or implement or try anything. So I'd say curate your feed and don't be afraid of consulting firms or consultants.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Hannah. And for all those listening, we'll see you next week.